What if the reason you don't land a school leadership role this year is not because of your resume or your interview, but because how you spent your summer? Brushing up your resume, reading books, and watching webinars is great. However, it's not what actually helps you stand out in a competitive hiring pool, and it's not what truly prepares you to land your first school leadership role. In today's episode, I'm sharing 4 strategic summer moves that most people overlook because they're not in a book, they're not on Google, and it requires you to start thinking like a leader before you even get the title. What's going on, aspiring school leader? I am Dr. Donovan Smalls II, educator, best-selling author, school leadership coach, and I help aspiring school leaders confidently land their first leadership role and lead with impact from day one. Today's topic is Get Hired, 4 summer moves for aspiring school leaders. Now, we know that the summertime is a critical time of personal and professional development for educators. Typically, we take this time to attend conferences or for rest and relaxation, which is also a strategic move toward becoming a better leader, right? Because we do know that rest is a leadership strategy. But today I want to talk about 4 things that aspiring school leaders should be doing this summer in order to properly prepare them to land their first leadership role, but to also thrive once you get that position. And so our first summer move is going to be anticipate the unwritten rules. If you don't know the game behind the scenes, you'll lose before the interview even starts. So before you go into your interview, you want to make sure that you do your research, because there are unspoken dynamics in each district. What I mean by that is you have to start doing your research, right? And maybe these things aren't areas where you can actually find more information about. However, I want you to do your due diligence as it relates to doing your research about the political climate of the district, about the population of students that are being served, right? You want to think about taking a deep dive into the data as it relates to academic achievement, right? What do those scores look like? You need to be able to talk about and speak to in your interview the data that is present that you have sifted through prior to your interview. So what are the unspoken dynamics? What are the power structures? Legacy relationships? What are the politics within some of the districts, right? And I'm not talking politics as it relates to race relations, right? I'm just talking about politics as it relates to education. What are the policies that the parents are truly trying to push within that district? What are the academic focuses of the previous school year? And you can typically find out what the strategic mission, vision, and core values are by visiting the district website. All of those things are extremely important because the last thing you want to do is go into an interview and not know anything about the district that you are applying to. So this summer, don't just prepare for any leadership job. Research specific schools and districts. I want you to ask yourself and find the answers to, if you can, what kind of leader thrives in this particular school district? That's extremely important. What's the school's culture really like, or the district's culture really like? Because sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes there is a difference between what is portrayed on a district website and what's actually happening within that district. What do parents and staff expect? And a lot of times, right, if you are trying to apply for a leadership role within the district that you are currently teaching in, you can find out the majority of this information. However, I truly do understand that if you are applying to a district outside of where you currently teach, then it may be a little bit more difficult. But the premise is to make sure that you are doing your due diligence so you truly understand the demographics, the academic achievement levels, like what areas can you speak to in terms of how you are going to support teaching and learning if you don't have a solid understanding of what's already existing, right? So you have to do your due diligence. Use what you learn when you do your research to then tailor your resume, your leadership story, and also your interview answers. So as you are doing your due diligence, you're doing your research, you're finding out more about the district, more about the school, right? You need to now tailor your responses, tailor your resume, tailor your cover letter to the information that you have found, right? The last thing you want to do is create some sort of generic leadership story or generic resume that doesn't focus on the school community, but focuses more on you. Because at the end of the day, you are a servant leader. Yes, I believe in transformational leadership as well, but you are a servant leader, meaning you have to understand what the research is within that particular district to then see how you can serve. That gives you a cheat code as it relates to answering your interview questions. Why? Because now you have a foundation in terms of what you are sifting your answers through, right? You're looking at the data, you're looking at your research, and then you're tailoring your responses to what you have found. So number one was anticipate the unwritten rules. Our second summer move for aspiring school leaders is build micro influence without the title. I'm a firm believer that you become a leader before having a leadership title or a leadership role specifically, right? And so leadership isn't a position, it's a pattern of showing up before anyone gives you permission. See, when it comes to hiring committees, when it comes to specifically if you are currently working in a district where you want to elevate into a leadership role, people are looking at what you are currently doing as a leader prior to you getting the role. And we have to remember that leadership doesn't always look glamorous. Leadership could look like you helping students cross the parking lot so that they don't get hit by cars, and you take the initiative and nobody had to actually ask you to do those things. Leadership can look like you volunteering to run a school-wide fundraiser. Leadership can look like you volunteering to be a part of a data team, right? You have to be strategic about the experiences that you want to get into for the following school year so that you're not second guessing and you don't have to, that's just another thing that you don't have to think about, right? So if you take this time in the summer to actually plan and partner with individuals who are leading different projects, maybe your assistant principals are leading different things, and now you can partner with them to help lead those initiatives. You have to be strategic about your experiences right now as a teacher in the classroom so that you are properly prepared when it comes to leadership. So stop waiting for a title to lead. This summer, I want you to think about how you can organize a professional development session, or mentor a new teacher, or lead a project, or volunteer for an effort. So think about what you can do beyond what you do in your classroom that can give you a competitive edge as it relates to the hiring pool, right? You have hundreds of candidates sometimes that are applying for one leadership role. And so what's going to make you stand out, specifically if you are someone who isn't a school leader right now, but you are an aspiring leader trying to land that first leadership role? You have to separate yourself by gaining as much leadership experience now that can carry you over, and the hiring committee could see your potential, right? Because at this point it is about potential, but what can you do right now to demonstrate your leadership capacity? These actions, right? These actions are going to create a leadership portfolio that you can speak to in your interview. You want to make sure that you are documenting your efforts throughout the school year, collect artifacts and reflections to use in your resume and interviews. And so the main concept that we're talking about today is alignment. You want to make sure that your experiences are aligned with where you want to go. I completely understand, because I was also in this category of, man, I just don't have enough time to gain the leadership experiences while I'm a teacher, because I'm during my planning periods, I'm planning, right? And I get that. It makes sense. But you have to, at some point, figure out, maybe it's before, maybe not before school, but maybe after school, Like, what can you do to get involved with? You have to figure out ways that you can start leading. And even if during your planning periods, maybe you are teamed with different teachers who also are responsible for leading and initiating professional learning communities, PLCs. How can you then figure out how to lead some of those sessions? It's all about strategic action. All right. So number 2 was build micro influence without the title. And this summer, I want you to think about planning for next year as it relates to what you can do as a leader. Number 3, create a crisis response playbook. So this particular playbook is going to help you understand how to truly handle situations that don't go the way that you thought that they were going to go. Because guess what? As a school leader, you are going to have to deal with crisis, right? You are going to have to deal with situations that are not ideal. And so how are you going to be able to handle those situations beyond constantly bringing them to your administrators? You have to think on your feet. You have to be able to think on solutions and not problems, because if you're bringing an issue to your administrators, you also want to start thinking about a solution to those issues, right? So you don't want to be somebody who's constantly bringing problems. Yes, you might be bringing a problem, but have you thought about a solution as well? You have to be solution oriented when you step into leadership, because you don't rise to the occasion, you default to your preparation. So you have to make sure that you are preparing in advance for those situations that don't go the way that you thought that they can go. Many candidates say they're ready. They think that they're ready for school leadership roles. But what happens when things go wrong? This summer, I want you to rehearse and think about these real scenarios as it relates to dealing with disgruntled parents, right? A parent might have some sort of issue with how you've handled a disciplinary action. How are you going to deal with that? I want you to think about instruction that may not align with the mission and vision and core values. How are you going to address that? Because what you don't address, you are allowing. And then I also want you to think about what happens if 2 students are fighting. One student initiates it, but like what actually happens if there is an emergency that occurs from that fight? These are all real scenarios that you are going to have to deal with when you become a school leader. And so this summer, I want you to think about how you can address these issues so that you can speak to them in an interview when you get that interview, because they might ask you, how are you going to deal with student conflict, right? And you want to be able to have a detailed response, because how will you lead under pressure? That's the question. Practicing now gives you the clarity and confidence that shows up later, because truly confidence comes from your preparation. And so if you are preparing for real life scenarios that you will experience as a school leader, you're going to be better off once you actually step into that role. So write out sample responses, role play with a peer or a coach. Reflect on your emotional intelligence and decision-making process. And these are some of the things that we work through with aspiring school leaders in my Elevate Your Impact coaching program, right? We literally work through real life scenarios so that you can get practice and see the impact of your decisions, because you are a decision maker. And when you become a school leader, you are responsible for upholding the code of conduct, which can perpetuate cycles of oppression for certain groups of individuals, or you can use it as a restorative practice to help students learn from their mistakes, but still have a consequence tied to something that is not necessarily punitive, but it is helping change behavior. So all of that is important. Number 3 was create a crisis response playbook. And lastly, I want you to reverse engineer the interview. Strong candidates answer the question. Great candidates answer the concern behind it. See, whenever you get a question from the interview committee, there is always an underlying issue, underlying concern, underlying leadership principle that you need to be able to address. So don't just memorize answers. Understand what interview panels really want to know. So when they ask about data, they're truly asking, can you positively influence academic results? When they ask about collaboration, they're truly asking, can you work with difficult staff in a way that is honorable? Right? So there is always an underlying message that they are trying to hear as you are speaking, as you are articulating your responses, and you need to be mindful of that. Because if you get a question, they're not asking you to regurgitate an answer that can come from a textbook. They're asking, have you dealt with a particular scenario that relates to the definition so that you can tie it to you showing up as a leader for their district and for their school. So take common questions and write down what fear or concern might be behind each one. Number 4 was reverse engineer the interview. If this episode helped you think differently about your leadership journey, send it to someone else. We want to continue to impact as many aspiring school leaders as possible so that we can be better for our teachers and for our students. And if you need additional support, my Elevate Your Impact coaching program allows you to get real life strategies, real life scenarios to help you become a better leader and actually develop your leadership story prior to your interview so that not only are you going to land your first school leadership role, but you're also going to lead with impact from day one. And if that's you, don't hesitate. Reach out, send me an email, and you can visit my website, donovansmalls2.com/coaching, so you can learn more about the Elevate Your Impact coaching program. As always, I hope you have a great week of teaching, leading, and learning. Take care.